This is Bonnie Vandermeulen, Training Coordinator for Wisconsin Facets. On behalf of our entire Wisconsin Facets staff, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is part of the Up to Me Starting the Conversation series. This is part 2 on defining stigma. Our presenter today is Sharon Dossett. Sharon is the Senior Training Specialist with Rogers in Health. She brings over 30 years of experience, 20 plus in leadership, working with traditionally underserved vulnerable populations in social service, legal, behavioral health, and community settings. Sharon is also a certified senior facilitator, professional trainer, mentor, and coach. She works locally and abroad with culturally diverse youth and adults to promote civil dialogue, self-awareness, empathy, and authentic communication for relationship community building. Sharon has a Bachelor's of Science degree in sociology and psychology and a master's degree in social work and an MBA. It gives me great pleasure today to introduce to you Sharon Dossett. Sharon?
Thank you so much for that warm welcome and introduction, Bonnie. It's so wonderful to be back here again this month to talk about part 2 of our 6-part presentation of the Up to Me Starting the Conversation series for parents. As a reminder, throughout this series, we will be using the word parents for ease and consistency, but we truly do intend for that term to include all caregivers, foster parents, grandparents who are caring for children, any parental figure who is working with a child or an adolescent with a challenge, a mental health challenge. Just to summarize last month, if you were not able to be with us at that time, we presented an overview of the series. In summary, the program is intended to assist parents in deciding whether, with whom, and how much of their loved one's story to share. There is, of course, an impact on the parent as well, so you too have a story and will want to decide whether, with whom, and how much of your story to share about parenting a child with a mental health challenge. So just to show you some of the considerations that we talked about last time and that we will continue to talk about as we move forward, here is the beginning of our list. So consider the pros and cons of telling someone about your loved one's mental health challenge. And this is going to be different for everyone. Everyone has a different story to tell, different thoughts and feelings about their story, and will just have to make their own list of pros and cons. There are some fundamental things that we'll share that you'll want to consider, but a lot of this is just asking yourself what's important to you, what the outcome might be as to whether or not you should disclose your story or your loved one's story. Know the reason for telling your loved one's experience. Is this to get additional services? Is it to help in a larger sense to reduce the stigma around mental health issues? Just what is your why? Know your reason why for disclosing or not disclosing the mental health challenge in your part of the story. Deciding on the level of disclosure or the level of sharing that's right for you. Again, this will be different for everyone. There is no judgment. It has to come from your own personal sense of comfort. Deciding who in your life has the characteristics of someone you think is safe and trustworthy if you choose to tell someone your story or your loved one's story. So are the characteristics that this person is generally warm and understanding in other ways? Do you feel that sharing would be a comfortable thing for you to do and that you will get a positive response? Some other considerations: testing. Test the person. Bring up a mental health topic that perhaps you've seen in the media and try to assess how that person is responding to that topic? Does it increase your sense of trust and comfort, or does it make you feel like maybe this isn't the right person to tell? Also consider that if this is someone who loves you and who knows you, or loves and knows the child that you're caring for with a mental health issue, they might actually respond differently to that personal story than they did the topic that they saw on the news. Again, you just have to lean into it and really trust yourself, trust your gut around whether this is going to be a safe person and safe situation. Consider what you will say ahead of time, if possible. Maybe not word for word, but if you have just a couple of ideas in your mind as to how you want to approach the topic, it might be a good idea to think of that in advance. Think about what parts of your experience you want to share to support your reason for sharing. So even if you decide to share your story and your loved one's story, it could be the whole story, or it could just be a part of the story. This will be very much attached to your why. So you might tell just the part of the story that helps your loved one to get additional services that they might need, or just another piece of your story that helps in some other way to support why you are sharing. Emphasize strength, recovery, and wisdom when sharing. So share something positive about the story, about how even though the child has a mental health challenge, look at all of these strengths that the child has. Look at your own strengths in working with the child with a mental health challenge. And talk about recovery, that there is recovery. Recovery is possible. Managing mental health is possible. Just the wisdom when you're thinking about sharing, have that hopeful outlook, and that will help perhaps that other person to feel hopeful and to see some positives and some strengths around your story and your child's story. Prepare responses just in case the person does not respond as you had hoped. You can do the testing and considering and the thinking through and have an idea that perhaps this is the right person, I'm going to feel comfortable, and then maybe it doesn't pan out the way that you thought that it might. Just have some thoughts in mind as to how you will approach that, so that in the end, you're going to be okay no matter what the response by the other person. You're still feeling good about that sort of vetting process that you went through, and you're feeling good about yourself in moving forward. And just because perhaps it didn't work in sharing in one situation, to not feel as though, well, I shouldn't or can't share going forward. It's going to be a different story with each individual that you approach, and in every context and situation that you approach. And so to look at it with fresh eyes every time there's a new opportunity to decide to share or not share. So that was an overview of what this entire series is about, those kinds of things that we will consider throughout the series. Today is about defining stigma. And so the goals are to define stigma, talk about how mental health stigma shows up in our society, and number 3, discuss the effects of stigma on the child with a mental health challenge, and also the stigma that there may be around a parent caring for a child with a mental health challenge. Let's step back for just a moment before defining stigma, and to just reflect statistically on why we dedicate ourselves to this topic, to the reduction of stigma related to mental illness. I talked in last month about the statistics, about the numbers. The numbers are just overwhelming. 21% of US adults experienced mental health illness in 2020. 1 in 6 youth aged 6 to 17 experience a mental health challenge each year. And 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by age 14. And by age 24, 75% of mental health challenges have been identified. Given these numbers, there is a high likelihood that you know someone in your personal life who lives with a mental health challenge or who has recovered from a mental health challenge. The reality is that living with a mental health challenge is difficult and unfortunately often made more difficult because of stigma. So now let's look at that definition of stigma. There are 3 components to the definition of stigma: ideas, beliefs, and actions. Stigma is defined as the ideas that eventually become beliefs that drive discriminatory actions. And these 3 things can happen in various ways. And so I've listed the various types of stigma that can occur and how you might see them as you go along in your day. And I'm going to describe each one of the various types of stigma. First, public stigma. Public stigma comes from people like friends, family, coworkers, and others who have the idea that people with mental health challenges or are dangerous, unpredictable, and that leads to prejudice against those who suffer, resulting in discriminatory actions like fewer opportunities for work. Social or school activities are reduced. The number of them are reduced, or perhaps there's trouble finding housing. Bullying, physical violence, harassment, and even health insurance that does not adequately cover your mental health treatment are types of public stigma. Let's move to perceived stigma. Perceived stigma is the belief that others have negative thoughts about people with mental health challenges. Internalized stigma or self-stigma reflects the individual's personal attitudes about their mental health challenge. This happens when a person internalizes, they take it in, they believe public stigma. As an example, if I am depressed, my self-stigma might be that depression is a sign of personal weakness. This might be influenced by my perceived belief or my public experience that most people believe depression is a sign of personal weakness. So I take that on. I take that as my belief about myself with my depression. Label avoidance. When a person chooses not to seek mental health treatment to avoid being assigned a stigmatizing label, that's label avoidance. Stigma by association occurs when the effects of stigma are extended to someone like a friend, family member, or parent of someone with a mental health challenge. Structural stigma. That is where policies and practices of large organizations like governments, companies, and schools that place restrictions on the rights or opportunities of persons living with mental health challenges. So those are all of the ways that we might see stigma show up around mental health challenges. And remember, it's the ideas that turn into beliefs that result in actions against people with mental health challenges. Let's look more closely at internalized shame and self-stigma. When mental health stigma is so pervasive, that means there's just this thread of it going throughout our being and our everyday lives. And it's what we hear perhaps in the media or when we're out and from friends and sometimes family members. When it's so pervasive, it's no wonder that individuals may hold stigmatizing beliefs about themselves and others who are struggling. This slide might reflect the feelings of you and or your loved one. So think about both self-stigma and stigma by association. When we start to see ourselves as different due to our child's mental health challenges, the false ideas of public stigma can shape what it means to us. Often it leads us to see ourselves as less than or not good enough, and that lower self-esteem fuels the idea that we are not able. And again, this is stigma. This is not true. And if I see myself as not good or able, it seems pretty reasonable for me to step back, to avoid situations that leave me feeling that way, and to cope with any pain that causes me by withdrawing or by being angry. Of course, this is a vicious cycle, a vicious, unhealthy cycle. Now let's look at reversing self-stigma. When I am included and given a voice in how I am supported, I begin to see myself as good. And when I see myself as good, I'm open to learning about my ability. And when I feel good and able, I care for myself and reach out to others. In this very act, I am reshaping the beliefs of those around me about people who face mental health challenges. The answer to both self and public stigma relies on inclusive environments where parents and caretakers work in partnership to direct the supports and services they need for resilience and for success. Next, I'd like to share with you a video about how we can break stigma. Again, we want to work in partnership with one another to help in resilience and success. So here's our video, and let's cross our fingers that it's going to work for us today.
You know that feeling where your thoughts scare you or make life tough? Sometimes it feels like no one else in the world has those thoughts or feelings. No one seems to know how difficult it is to deal with your feelings. And it's not easy to share your deepest secrets. You might think something is wrong with you. Or you might worry what other people think. And all of that makes your thoughts and feelings worse. Our culture has created this environment of shame. Until the 1960s, society sent people away if they had challenges managing their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Over time, we learned that we didn't have to be afraid. We learned how to help people get better. We became hopeful. But there are remnants of those images in our culture today, which is why some people still feel uncomfortable talking about it. The stigma has taken new forms too. With more access to more people all the time, it can seem like the world is telling us it's not okay to be anything but perfect. The truth is, everyone has thoughts or feelings that can be hard to deal with. So why do we make it so difficult on ourselves by judging others who could be going through the same challenges we are? What if, instead of seeing labels, we saw people who are struggling, and could be there for them so they didn't feel so alone? What if we looked past our fear of mental health and started to talk about it in a constructive way? What if, as a society, we used empowering words and healthy images to help people feel supported? Maybe then more of us could feel comfortable telling others when we're having a hard time. Maybe more people would get the help they need. And maybe one day we won't have to talk separately about mental health and physical health, but just health. The truth is, each of us has the power to change our culture. Will you join us? Share this video with a kid, your neighbor, a friend, and help us break the stigma of mental health.
I absolutely love this video. I appreciate the clear, simple language of the video. And I'm wondering if, after talking about the different kinds of stigma, whether you were able to identify any of the forms of stigma that we talked about. I also appreciated the reference to social media. With more, it said, with more access to more people all the time, it can seem like the world is telling us that it's not okay to be anything but perfect. How many times have you experienced this if you're on one of the social media platforms and all the smiling faces and all the wonderful pictures of people having a good time and being with friends, and everything seems to be perfect and well and great, and it's just not the case. Everyone has difficulties and challenges, mental health challenges. And to paint this picture that everything is perfect, it's just not the reality. But it may make us feel, those who are looking at these pictures on social media, it may make us feel that, wow, you know, my life isn't like that. So maybe I'm not like everyone else. And it's just not the case. And we have to remind ourselves of that. Well, let's see if we can move this forward. Okay, here we are. All right, so if stigma is so damaging to us, how can we attempt to reduce it? Some of these were echoed in the video. For years, people and organizations have protested stigmatizing images and language in the media. But this approach can have unintended negative consequences at times. How many people have heard of the show Duck Dynasty? I know it's been a while. A friend, a few years ago, people protested the show after one of the main characters spoke out quite strongly against gay marriage, and people called for a boycott of the show. Rather than to have an intended effect, ratings actually rose and Duck Dynasty sales increased. So protests approach can backfire. Another approach to reduce stigma has been education. In this approach, we often talk about myths that people believe and educate them on the facts to counter those myths. For example, there's a stereotype that people with mental illness are dangerous, but the fact is that people with mental illness are actually more likely to be victims of violence. The problem with this approach is that the effects are not often long-lasting. Once people encounter someone or a story that seemingly reaffirms their stereotype, they revert back to that previous stigmatizing belief. While education and protest may have some positive gains, contact is the approach most supported by research. Not saying there's no value in education and protest, but if our goal is to reduce stigma, what we know for sure works is that contact and getting to know a person living in recovery with mental health challenges is the most effective approach. Contact with people who have lived experience with mental health challenges and recovery has been one of the most effective means of reducing stigma of mental illness. These are all people who have faced mental health and substance use disorder challenges and share their stories of living in recovery on the mental health website. So this is right from the Rogers website. What we know about contact suggests that people are similar to us. They will have the most credibility, and that is motivation behind peer-to-peer programs. That said, I want to emphasize that Up to Me is about choices. Everyone feels differently and has different boundaries and expectations when it comes to their private health information. And that's what this is, private health information. So this contact connection is simply one consideration that could possibly support one's resilience and help to change one's thoughts in a positive way about their own mental health. There are many other ways in which you can help to reduce stigma and support yourself and your loved ones with or without disclosing your story. Make sure that when you're talking about your own situation, your child with mental illness, that you're seeing the person and not the illness. Look at the strengths, the positives, how this person is managing in a positive way, in spite of having a mental health illness. Strive to listen and understand. Use respectful language at all times, not just with your loved one who has the mental health challenge, but just in general. This will help to reduce the stigma. Offer your support to others during their health struggles and recovery. Encourage equality in how people perceive physical and mental illness. So next month, please join my colleague Emily Jonesberg as she discusses self-stigma and its impact on you. We touched on it today, but Emily will dive in and further explore the concept of self-stigma, the story you tell yourself about the challenges you and your loved ones face. Participants will have the opportunity to identify the negative narratives one has told themselves, challenge the negative narrative that they've heard from others, and explore alternatives to those negative narratives that become one's truth. And we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that people are feeling supported and resilient. If there are questions, I see that we have a few minutes. I'm happy to take them at this time.
Actually, we have a couple of comments. One that referred back to the video itself, where they talked about mental versus physical health, and that it probably should be noted that people shouldn't be separating mental health and from physical health, because mental and physical health all make up your whole entire biological health. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. It's whole person health. And your mental health state can cause physical challenges. Your physical manifestations can cause mental health challenges. It's all systemic. It's your whole body well-being, your whole self. Wonderful point. Thank you.
And the other comment was about stigma itself and learning to break the cycle. It seems as if people are caught up in this cycle of stigma and what happens and how it gets worse over time. Do you have any specific kind of suggestions, similar to like the video in breaking that cycle? How in schools can we approach breaking the cycle, for example?
I think going to your school and asking about what kinds of mental health supports are there and how they can help to promote the mental health of students. I've worked as a clinician in schools, co-located with the staff, making sure that they understand the supports that the kids need while they're there, and actually serving the kids while they're there, sitting with the kids one-on-one, doing therapy with them in the schools, helps to reduce the stigma. It helps to normalize that we all have challenges that we go through. It helps the staff to understand, gives them the language, and helps the kids to get the care that they need, that perhaps they don't, the parent may not have time to get them there after school or some other time. They can get their care right there at the school. So making sure that the environment, asking the school to promote, again, seeing the person, not the illness, the things that are on the slide, striving to listen and understand, and encouraging others to do that, encouraging respectful language. All of those things help to reduce stigma and can do the same in the school setting.
And then just one final comment that we have that states that maybe it's about time that we raise up the services that counselors and social workers play in schools, because they can really help children as it relates to their mental health challenges.
Absolutely. And as I said, I was working in one of the Milwaukee public schools, but it would be wonderful to have more of those services in all of the schools, because it's not restricted to a certain area. Everyone has mental health challenges. And the more we can have this common language and talk about it and have programming around mental health, that will reduce the stigma. That will certainly help to reduce the stigma.
Well, Sharon, thank you. That's the last comment and question that we have. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share?
I just look forward to having everyone back next month. I hope that you can go through this entire 6-part series with us. And if you're not able to in the moment, that you will go back and look at it, look at the material, and see if there are some things that resonate with you, that you find supportive and helpful as you gain your resilience around working with your child with mental health issues and helping them to feel as supported as possible. And if there's anything else that we can do as an entity, feel free to contact myself or Emily at Rogers, and we are happy to address anything further, and to even talk with your school staff if they're wanting or open to do that, because we do work with mental health and also compassion around mental health challenges and healthy cultures in schools.
Well, thank you, Sharon, so very much. I greatly appreciate your presentation today. I know that those in attendance really learned a lot, as I did as well. So thank you again. This will conclude our webinar for today. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and please join us again for the next installment of the Up to Me series coming next month. Please also be reminded that Wisconsin Facets has over 100 scheduled trainings and webinars for the year 2022. Please feel free to check our website calendar and register for any of those upcoming trainings that you may be interested in. Also, please watch for the short evaluation that will be coming your way after today's live presentation. Thank you again, Sharon. Thank you again, all of you, for participating. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.